3 over on the 16th tee.
Okay. What are you off these days?
6.
That's good golf.
Finished 5, 6, 5.
And you giving out about Rory's mental fragility?
Did
you bottle it? I mean, is that effectively what happened here?
Well, I can't see how
Was it a bottle job or a choke? Bottle or a choke?
I don't. Well, I would say I lost, but I won.
Oh, he's okay. Yeah, they're wondering, could you pull the mic a bit closer to you?
Yeah, is that okay?
Do you want a test from Rory? Is he okay?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, he's not on. He's either not on or I'm not getting him.
Those Derry semi-finals are a bit lopsided.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There he goes. Perfect.
And CRT ended up with Newbridge Mackerfield.
I don't know, like something's gone wrong there. Somebody thought something else was going to happen.
Yeah.
Week 2 and we're still here. Who knew? Conán Doherty back again.
Back again. Who wouldn't come back and sit beside you, Joe?
Well, indeed. A couple of bits and bobs going on. We have Rory O'Connor and Conor McKeon waiting to... Their names are difficult to say back to because you're saying Rory O'Connor, Conor McKeon. It throws you.
Red Lorry, yellow Lorry.
I need to just... It's Conor McKeon, Rory O'Connor.
McKeon and O'Connor. Not even that's hard.
They are waiting in the wings to come in and chat about the weekend that was, about the weekend upcoming. I have some correspondence. I might run you through a few things before we start the panel. So, for instance, Ben in Adelaide, formerly of Cork, was in touch. Ben, lovely to have you with us. Hi, Joe, and all involved in the podcast. Really enjoyed the first week of the show. Best of luck going forward. Thank you very much, Ben. Just wanted to submit a question for Gunter Steiner this week. Could you ask him if... I would think he gets this question a lot, but it's a good question. Every driver on the current grid were to get the same car for a world championship, who wins? So we'll certainly ask him that. It is a sport where your dad being a billionaire owning a team tends to be very helpful, which really puts me off it. There's not much of a meritocracy going on.
We're talking about the Premier League or Formula 1 here. There is that, and there is always that wondering that you think, like, who is the best driver here and who would do the best in the same car? But is that also the main part of the sport, is who can build up their car the best? And obviously if they brought in some sort of financial restrictions or something like that, it would make it more interesting. But I do think for the, as we call them up in the Northwest, the petrol heads, like that's the sort of thing they love as well.
Enjoy the arms race.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. We have Jason who's been in touch. Jason, wake up. Jason, wake up, Jason. I'm imagining now Jason listening to us and he's sitting there at 3 a.m. with his newborn. And listening to us. This is an intervention. Jason! He says, hi Joe, really enjoying the pod. I've just had a new addition to the house.
Brilliant.
So all that sport rolled into one daily podcast, exactly what I was looking for. And he adds, I'm not sure if the saga has ended, but my suggestion for the Monday panel podcast would either be the aftermath or after the action. Don't judge Jason. He's tired. I guess for several weeks, months, being a new parent is basically a medical condition. So you hang in there, Jason.
Congratulations, Jason. I'm on the same boat myself.
You are?
Yeah, I'm loving it.
You're 10 weeks.
Yeah, at 12 now, actually. Oh, yeah, flowing through this few weeks working together.
Well, that's true, yeah. And is it going well?
It's going great, yeah. I'm actually interested in his podcasting habits now because my consumption rate has gone up, but it's more, late night washing, doing the dishes, putting the laundry up. It's not. I'd be interested to know how people are doing it. Are they with the child listening to the podcast? Because what I'm doing now when I'm with the child in the middle of the night is playing chess. I've gotten into chess on my phone. Okay. If he's sleeping and he won't sleep lying down, I've got him sitting on me and I'm on chess.com playing chess. So if anybody ever comes across me, I'll probably be really bad, so you'll get an easy win there.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's a real thing, isn't it, that they won't sleep lying down?
Yeah. It's really cute, but after a few nights, it's like,
no, it's tough.
Okay, we'd all sleep a lot better if you did lie down.
And I think as first-time parents, even during the day, you're just completely love-bombed. So you're like, of course I'll hold you.
Yeah.
But then you do create a monster for yourself because that day has to come. And for us, it didn't come for months and months and months, even during the day.
Yeah.
So no nap happened without one of us being trapped. And that you probably, I would not dream of dare had the knowledge to give anyone advice about anything, but I know for ourselves, if there was anything we thought, oh geez, we maybe should have actually put Baba down for nap, and just made that an option too, but we just were too keen to let them sleep on us.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because one of the first pieces of advice I got, or I overheard in the hospital ward, was, don't pick him up, he'll get used to it. Yeah. And I was like, what's wrong with that?
1850s, why? Like,
let him get used to it. I'll
No.
be here to pick him up.
it's that difficult thing. But you know what? Then again, do I regret the 6 months where she slept on us the whole time? No, I don't.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
congratulations, Jason.
Yeah, go on. Super. Hello all, enjoying listening to the podcast, wishing the best of luck. Just to put a variation on the sledging debate you had last week, I was part of a Kerry club who played against a Tyrone club in an All-Ireland club semi-final. This was in 2009 at the height of the Kerry-Tyrone rivalry, so we were warned beforehand, be ready for sledging from the Tyrone club, including the story about the girlfriend's phone number. Anyway, it turned out this particular team, Trillick, if you're interested, did not get involved in anything like that whatsoever. I remember one of our players turning to our manager in the dressing room afterwards and asking him where he got his information from. As we all know, Tyrone had the upper hand over Kerry at this time. This extended to club matches as well. However, we won the game. And even as a Kerry man, I have often wondered how much has sour grapes from Kerry teams and supporters affected this rivalry, wonders John. So it's a different slant on the sledging situation. Maybe to a point. I think, to be fair, a lot of smoke without there being some fire when it comes to Tyrone. But it's good, it's good to see it wasn't like every team. Trillick, honourable mention.
It's always the example you reach to as well, though, and you always clarify it with, I don't know why I'm thinking of Tyrone, but I'm thinking of Tyrone when it comes to this.
I don't even know if the phone number story is a Tyrone story.
Yeah, but it's interesting, coming from the embattled 6 counties, and obviously your back's a bit more up when you hear these stories, and you're trigger happy to jump on the defence. But I do often think of when you hear these stories, if it's an Armagh, if it's Derry or Tyrone, it's a northern problem. Under 14 game in Roscommon, referee gets hit. It's a GAA problem, and we have to sort that out. It's not like we don't use the Roscommon example now forever. It's an interesting dynamic, I always find, but maybe I'm just too entrenched in it.
I've never heard someone say that before. Yeah. Interesting.
You don't need to take it just because I'm saying that. This is my lived experience. You don't need to. But like, it's.
You could possibly be right. There's definitely that it's a GAA problem and northern problem thing now that you say it, I think.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Although somebody might show me the stats of rows and games, and I've been at plenty, especially in the north, and I've been involved in them, and I've played club football in both counties, Dublin and Derry.
Oh yeah, you have.
Yeah, definitely have an easier time, let's say, in Dublin, not quality-wise, but sledging-wise and
physicality-wise.
Physicality,
okay. We should talk about that sometime. Let's actually tease that out someday on a chat. And then a last one. So this Monday panel situation, we obviously have to put to bed. Conor McKeon is like I slag him. He said, "Have you made enough of the Monday panel thing? Do people know there's an issue with the name?" So it has I think crossed into indulgent. So we'll move on. I was between two. Like it got to the point where there were too many suggestions in that it just was like, well, paralysis by analysis. It's just like a billion things here, a billion names. They were hard to even compute after a while. So I still, in my head, had organised fun or not the Monday panel. And the man who has settled it for us is Danny Fitzgerald.
Oh.
And there's just a randomness to this because Danny Fitzgerald sent his email at 3:41 a.m. this morning. So it was the first email I read.
Nap trapped Danny is sending.
He's either nap trapped or he's abroad. Danny, let us know. Hey, Joan team, really enjoyed the first week of the pods. I have sorted the pods straight into my number one spot. Enjoyed Paulie especially. Great work. Couple of suggestions for the Monday pod. Yeah, more suggestions. Final whistle, the weekend wrap, match point, at a time. Do you know what I mean? After a while, it's like, I'm not hearing anything. But he said, I don't love organised fun, personally. All the best, Danny. And so I had arrived in this morning thinking it's either organised fun or not the Monday panel. Saw Danny's email. Do you know what, Danny? You've swung it.
A bit of directness from that.
Danny, you had the casting vote. Organised fun out, not the Monday panel in. We're going to press on. How you feeling?
I feel okay about that. Not the Monday panel was probably my favourite, and I just love the straight talkingness of Danny there, because I have started to learn the value of a full stop myself. Whereas before, if I had written that email, I would have given you another 2 paragraphs because of this, because of that, because of, and I know you're thinking about that, but Danny just said, don't like it, full stop, see you later.
Yeah, and I'm suggestible enough that it's way, like, it was, okay. I just want to be loved.
Great point, Danny.
So let's get on with not the Monday panel. Outside we have Conor McKeon and Rory O'Connor. I think I enjoyed on Friday having 3 people, so you're going to stay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Conán Doherty. Happy Monday, everybody. We're coming at you once again. So, Conán, we've bullied into staying on. Conán, you're welcome once again.
Thanks very much.
And the dream team invited back. Rory O'Connor and Conor McKeon, both of the Irish Independent. Week 2. You're both here. What does that tell you?
I feel like you throw that phrase around liberally, Joe. Yeah. Say it to all the girls.
There's a touch of that. Well, you're very welcome back.
Thank you.
You obviously didn't disgrace yourself in week 1. You can acknowledge that much, I would think.
We try not to. That's the first objective every day.
It's the first time somebody has acknowledged that.
None of you got a text on Sunday night, did you? You come onto the panel, you were all texted well in advance. Really?
I think Conor got the pat on the shoulder first, so I think he's the top performer.
Conor came over to me and said, I'm here every Monday.
Please, pick me.
Poor old Conor got the nod on Monday morning.
Yeah, but I never miss training, so I'm ready to go all the time.
That is true. Do not take offence when eventually we don't have you back on a Monday. It's not just going to be the Conor and Rory show.
Yeah, you say that now.
There's a nice ring to it, though.
Potential name for the panel?
No, it is not the Monday panel is what we've settled on.
Gonna go for it? Grant.
Yeah,
did we make a big enough deal about it before we're settling on?
There's a caustic quality to your presence, which is much appreciated. So, a few things to get through, quite a lot to get through. We may not get to everything. An international week is here. How does that make us feel? We have the place of the good old traditional highlight show in 2024, Match of the Day in the dock. There's been concussion controversy in the Premiership. 3 players wrongly left on the pitch across the opening 2 rounds, and that's obviously in tandem with Michael Cheika's ban as well. Munster, not embarrassing this weekend. Rory was in Cork, he's still wet. And the League of Ireland title race does what it does. Shamrock Rovers moved to within striking distance. Damien Duff does not love Stephen Bradley's comments on the average quality of the league. That and the very sorry state of golf, all to be discussed. International week. People happy about this. Arne Slot, after Liverpool's win at Sellers Park, he spoke after the game about just looking forward to drawing breath after a really good start, in fairness to him, to post-Jurgen Klopp life. Also, Eric Ten Hag, Aston Villa 0, Manchester United 0. It was all set up for something very dramatic and consequential, and in the end, it was none of those things. But probably just enough of a sticking plaster on their worst start to a Premier League season and their worst start to a league season since 1989 for Ten Hag to just scuttle away and have a few days without constant scrutiny. Jonathan Wilson is going to join us later on to discuss all. What about the rest of us, though? Conor, you floated this particular talking point. International week no longer setting your heart racing.
No, like I find myself kind of increasingly in that congregation of people whose heart actually sinks when you look at the next Premier League fixture and you realise it's 2 weeks away, and then the dawning realisation that it's international break week. And it's a curious phenomenon. I think, like, of all the representative teams, I think the Ireland football team is the one that has the potential to unite everybody. But I don't know what it is. Like, is it just poor results? Is it a lack of identity? Is it international football generally that has stopped? Like, how are we going to reverse that trend? Because I think there's a huge amount of apathy there.
What do you think it is in your case?
So, like, I tuned in a fair bit for the start of the Stephen Kenny reign because there was the promise of something different. And I think the idea that somebody with a League of Ireland background who hadn't been to England, turning the team around, I think that appealed in a big way. But I'm not sure. I saw last week that Heimer said that his job was to qualify for the next international tournament. But is that enough? Like, if we get there and we lose 5-0 to Croatia because they've got 2 good midfielders, like, will we be all up at the Walkinstown roundabout with our inflatable hammers? Like, we probably won't. But I think if you go back, like, it wasn't that we won all the time under Jack Charlton or anything like it, but there was always that possibility that we could win any game. There was an excitement around it. There was a general buzz. You could feel it on International Week. So I think more than qualifying for tournaments, even, I think having a team that is capable of giving you those big moments again, I think that's what we're missing.
And this team just makes you think...
Well, they're just too far off it, I mean, like, the England game was a very, very stern reminder of our place in the overall order of things. Like, the idea that you're going to go out and take a major scalp with the team as it is at the moment, I think is miles off. But, like, the people were saying, well, what the contrast, that contrast has to be either the functional Giovanni Trapattoni, Martin O'Neill team or the or the whatever we had under Stephen Kenny, that there's no middle ground, and I suppose maybe we might see this week that there is a middle ground. Like was it 37,000 or something at the Greece game, you know? And when you consider that Munster and Leinster are filling Croke Park this weekend, you know, there's
Makes you sick, does it?
I wouldn't say sick. Like,
Where are you running it?
37,000 for a Greece game. I know they were sold in bundles with the England game, so that was probably part of it. It's a really, like, if you look across Europe, it's a really healthy attendance, and Heimar Hallgrimsson has been stunned by the level of scrutiny and attention that his team is getting. I don't think he realised that the Irish football team is as big a deal.
Does your heart sink?
No. I mean, I find it very interesting. I find it very, very depressing. I'm not a Premier League. I'm not a Barclays man. I wouldn't, live for the Premier League. I mean, Bows have 2 games this weekend. That's more interesting to me than anything Ireland do. But I would have Ireland above the Premier League. I just found, even watching Match of the Day 2 last night, waiting to see an Irish player, and Nathan Collins, crops up with a goal, and you're like, oh, at least there's one. I listened to I was driving down to Cork for the rugby on Saturday, and I was listening to the live Premier League stuff. And I mean, on Off the Ball, they spoke about Ryan Manning for about an hour because he was the only Irish player in action on Saturday. Like, and he doesn't even get into the team. We've fallen so far. So much of it is by design because our association has been so poor. The investment in the sport is criminal. Really, there's criminal neglect gone into it, when compared to what other countries have done. Because the big contrast, the big thing that's changed since the Charlton era and when we were kids watching, like, we were so spoiled. I was a kid, about 8 or 9 for Italian 90. I was, it is that basically England, Germany, Spain have weaponized their resources, and we were all playing. We were kind of punching above our weight back then, but we're not even giving ourselves a chance now. So, I do find it interesting. It's sobering. It's having been at League of Ireland games for the last 30 years, I don't think you can't divorce it from like being in crumbling stadiums, watching at times part-time teams on a regular basis. This is our league. You can't rely on another nation to do it for you. There's a bit of chickens coming home to roost. Even everyone being frustrated at the England game. The England game was it was a brilliant event. It was a reminder. Well, it was for 15 minutes. It was a reminder of what this team can be and what it can deliver. And then you're watching them. I got really annoyed during it for a number of reasons. But I was like, all these people are really annoyed at the Irish team being played off the park, but next week they're going to be tuning in. I'm not like, I don't begrudge people. They prefer the Premier League, fine, but like, this is major part of the problem is that our money, even the fans' money, is invested in English football rather than Irish football.
I hear what you're saying. Conan's the problem.
I am who I am. I like what I like to. But Connor's sort of touching on my feelings of it there. So we've only ever qualified for 6 major tournaments.
That's not bad,
I know, but this is
just that it came in such a burst.
Yeah, and it's such a weird bar now, I think, that we hold against some managers. It's unrealistic.
We'll still get into the Euros pretty soon.
Yeah.
What?
No, they keep expanding it. Yeah, we will. Yeah,
it'll be 50 teams soon.
Yeah.
My sense of it is that it's only kind of dormant. Do you know what I mean?
Same. I completely.
Like the Irish national football team, because just the sheer popularity of the sport,
agreed,
is the one team that will literally, be a focal point again for the entire sport.
The actual team of us is what you're saying.
And the thing, I guess, we don't get the payoff. Like what you're saying about the international break, like the Nations League is better than the friendlies were. Yeah. But for most countries, this is all part of the investment that comes in the payoff of June and July of a tournament. And like tournament football is better than any other football. It's better than anything you see in the Premier League. It's more exciting. The players care about it more. I know they were wrecked last year. The problem is, because of all the things we've talked about, we're not getting the payoff. So all we're getting is the disappointment.
Tournaments as good as they used to. I know it's
But for me, they're better than ever.
But like, there is a genuine, like, I know that we're all very inclined to think that things were better 30 years ago. But like will kids that were our age in Italian 90 remember the next, like the kids who were around when Ireland qualified for the Euros in 2012 and 2016, like, did that resonate in nearly the same way? I don't know.
I think the people aged 18 to 24 who went to Sopot and Gdansk, they probably don't remember an awful lot of the detail, but they remember the experience.
The Robbie Brady moment was a moment, and Wes Houlihan. If you're a certain age, that would have been big.
And you can never have your first time again. Like 1990 was like just. There can never be those conditions can never be recreated in this country. So I don't think we could. That was just such a remarkable thing. Like, it's never going to be like that again.
It's probably hard to compete as well when you consider that. Okay, our first World Cup, and then our third World Cup with Saipan, they're basically two of the biggest cultural moments in recent Irish history.
Yeah.
You know? So after that, it's just football tournaments.
But I do agree it's dormant.
Yeah.
I mean, the second a bit of
Ah,
momentum comes,
absolutely.
everybody's just...
But even like I was trying to think of a decent comparison, and I think that Wales team with Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey are your classic example. The whole of Wales was behind them in a big way, and like they qualified for major tournaments and they were never going to win them. But I think with the team they had, there was that fizz of anticipation that they might win any game.
Exactly.
To a semi-final.
And that's where you're going with it. You know?
And this is why I almost pine, and I'm not calling for Stephen Kennedy to get the job again, and I'm not comparing it to the cultural moments of 2002 or 1990, but at least there was a culture war. At least people had feelings either way. At least it galvanised half of the country. I remember going to a Serbia match at home. It was awful, but the last 10 minutes, Ireland were trying to get an equaliser. It was the one that somebody cleared off Shane Duffy's face and it went in. And the sense in the Aviva that night was, we've got our man and all our break here.
There were moments when it felt like it could lift off. The Portugal night and Kenny, like, it didn't work. And I'm not, again, I agree with you. I think if Duff got the job, that would happen again. Because people would get behind Duff in that way. Like, his name. Hallgrimsson could be a great fit, but to me, I mean, he dropped out of nowhere. He's like an AI manager. Like he's just, and we still haven't. I feel like he's just going to come and go, and we'll never know really anything about him. No one will. It's very hard to connect to him because he's come out of nowhere. Maybe he gets a couple of results and people will get behind them, and it'll be this gift from the gods. But right now, it feels more relevant than it's ever done. I agree the dormant part. I think people will get behind it if it starts going well again. But ultimately, if it made you feel good, everyone would get behind it again. It wouldn't feel irrelevant, and it doesn't make people feel good now. It's just morbid curiosity at the moment. And like our best player, our generational talent, is sitting on the bench for Brighton and Hull Albion as they come back from 2-0 down to win 3-2, and their front three are brilliant. And you're like, yeah. And as a Bohemians fan, like we're due 10% of his next sale, so like we need to get him back on there. We need to get him back on track.
But as a Bohemians fan, and therefore with a predilection towards socialism, does that mean that Bohemians are going to spread that payment through the rest of the clubs in the league when it comes in?
No, that's not on the cards.
A segue to another, it's not as good as it used to be kind of a discussion, the plight of the Humble Highlights show. So there was a leaked email last week which suggested that it was Gary Lineker's last match of the day on Saturday just gone, not fully verified. The Mail tried to ask him about it during the week. He said, F off, I'm not talking to you, to the journalist. And so he came on Saturday night, and I don't think there was a great sense of expectation it would be his last show, but he dropped in a little 1 second moment of,
7 games on the way, and it's my final show before the international break. Micah Richards is joined by Alan Shearer, who's co-commentary this week.
So we all thought, okay, much ado about nothing. But Owen Slot in the London Times wrote an interesting piece over the weekend, and it was in effect, the headline did most of the heavy lifting here. Never mind Gary Lineker, is Match of the Day the best use of BBC cash? Now, I know we're not overly worried about the use of BBC's cash, but he was making points like UK Athletics, they could do a deal for $3 million and have tons of live action across the year, for instance, and all manner of lesser exposed sports could be across the BBC schedule. But, it was more when he was talking about the fact that just 10 years ago, which is blink of an eye, Match of the Day was pulling in 4 million viewers, and this has halved down to 2 million viewers. And I hadn't quite realised, maybe I should have just given the cost of TV rights at large, but BBC are handing over 70 million sterling annually to make Match of the Day, which is not nothing. And so, the point has generally been made. We now live in an era where by 5:30 on a Saturday, every single Premier League game with commentary has a 4 or 5 minute highlight version on YouTube. Everybody has seen everything. Everybody knows the results. And therefore, why would you watch Match of the Day? And clearly 2 million people have subscribed to that view. Where is Match of the Day for you guys now? Is this still a treasured, important part of your weekend schedule, or has it fallen off a cliff in the last decade?
No, I think it's gone. Like as a cultural, it probably sits in a similar place to where Top of the Pops did sort of 10, 12 years ago, and nobody could have envisaged the end of Top of the Pops when it was in its pomp. But I think the only thing that maybe the Beeb are holding on to is that without it, they have no coverage whatsoever of the biggest league in British sport. And that would be the only reason that you'd imagine to hold on to it. Like, just for instance, somebody in my house the other day who's a Newcastle fan came in and they literally an hour after Newcastle's game was over, pressed the button on the remote control that you talk into and said Newcastle, and then it flashes up the 3-minute highlights the thing. So the idea that you're going to, you know, set your alarm for 10:30 on a Saturday night to sit in to, and it doesn't really, you know, like the highlights shows, there's so much technical analysis that the Beeb just don't have enough time to go into a match of the day, and thankfully it's not quite as banter-tastic as the, you know, the CBS Champions League Golazzo coverage during the week. So I don't know where it sits, you know, and other than retaining it for, I suppose, just reasons of kind of cultural status and cultural value, I don't know how it can survive in that marketplace.
Geez, I still have a real fondness for it. It's still like massively important to me. It's certainly important that the national sport as it is over there is free to air. I think there's some presence for like the millions of children and adults as well who just can't afford subscription television, which is a complete rip-off, obviously. So I think that's great. I think that's a magical thing that it comes on the Beeb on a Saturday night. But also, I mean, the great failing of those highlights shows is that I watch them and I have no sense of the game. And maybe that there's a professional aspect there where I'm conscious I'm going to be talking about some of these games. But you watch highlights, they're often completely misleading. And some of the pundits, I mean, if Danny Murphy's on, I can't say it for all of them, but for instance, he'll do a 30-second summary of the tactics, who won and why, and I think it's fantastic. So I'd hate for it to go. I think it'd be such a loss. I still have the highlight show on such a pedestal. I think actually, if you like analysis, it's important. If you just want to see the goals, then of course YouTube blows it out of the water. And I would suspect maybe Monday Night Football over the last decade has had something to do with the situation, because their analysis is just so much better than what you might get on the BBC. So I could understand how someone might say, well, I don't need to worry about hosting a sports podcast on a Monday, so I'll just watch the goals on YouTube and I'll make sure to get Neville and Carragher on a Monday, and that'll be my brilliant analysis, a full hour of it. So I don't need Michael Richards and Alan Shearer, for instance. But I think in the main, I still have it as such a thing. I don't have it as, I still think it'll be going in 20, 30 years, no problem.
I don't know. Like, everything is changing so quickly that I don't think you can make that prediction at all. I think during the Euros it was very interesting that Lineker, Shearer in particular were making headlines in their podcast, but they weren't making headlines for what they were supposed to be doing in a TV studio. That they reserved their more candid opinions for a more informal setting, and they probably got a huge. I don't know what, I couldn't compare the listenerships on them, but I thought that was an interesting shift that we're seeing all the time. I think people seem to have an enormous appetite to listen to people like us talk about sport, and you know, the higher profile the person, the better, and the more candid they are, the better. And they want to watch the 3-minute highlights, and then they want to go and listen to an hour of someone talking about it, but they don't necessarily want to do the two things at once. They're on the move more. Certainly, I don't watch Match Day anywhere near as much as I used to. Sunday Game, I think I would throw in the same bracket. Declan McBennett, again, League of Ireland thing, last couple of years, one of the big bugbears is that RT did away with the highlights programme. And when Declan McBennett came on Dan and Johnny Ward's podcast recently, or last year, he said, look, there's no market for, the only real market there is for highlight shows is Match of the Day. It's the only one, and Sunday Game will be the Irish equivalent of that. Yeah. But even in recent years, I watch it a lot less than I used to.
Why is that, Rory?
Time, and it just feels really dated. It feels really, I want people, when I listen to people talk about sport, I want them to go into much greater detail. And I guess I think people are more interested in the thing that they're interested in, and they're not necessarily interested in what happens elsewhere. Yes. Everyone's honing in on their thing.
Well, Conor's Newcastle fan watches the Newcastle highlights and then listens to 8 Newcastle podcasts.
Yeah.
Is the reality. See, the Sunday Game's interested in that you could argue Match of the Day has been superseded by technology.
Yeah.
Whereas there's almost a production problem with the Sunday Game in that there are just too many games.
Yeah, and the problem as well is, and this is the issue as well, the Sunday Game has the same as Match of the Day, that because it's taxpayers' money, it's almost seen as a public service. So
it's not costing 70 million.
No, but you still have to give a decent showing to X, Y and Z, because there's a certain amount of your viewership, a certain amount of your fee payers want to see that, even if it's a very small amount. So
they're also trying to do 2 sports.
Yeah, they're trying to do 4 sports.
And isn't it interesting, because when RTE announced that they were going to show an extra highlight show this year, I think everyone got excited.
The Saturday night one,
and that was always the fear. Is like, are they just going to try and save the Sunday Game and have another Sunday Game so they can fit more shows into it or more highlights, rather than what everyone was thinking? Will they do a Monday Night Football?
I feel sorry for them, because there's no solution.
But it's also choice, because like you're sitting there on Saturday night at 10:30. Do you watch Shogun or do you watch Match of the Day? You know, you have so much at your disposal.
True.
Now, if you know you're going to come on here and talk about it on Sunday, it's it's definitely the best. Like even watching Match of the Day too, I did it because I knew I was coming in to talk. I stayed up for that.
Did you enjoy it?
I found it. I don't know if you watched it, but Graham Potter was on, and he looked so uncomfortable with the banter. Like Stephen Warnock was all in on banter. Graham Potter was all in on getting a new job and wanted to show how good he is at stuff. And it was interesting. It is the best way of consuming the weekend's football. I think the YouTube highlights are too small. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it does give you a decent synopsis, but
it's a nicer spacing versus the Sunday game, which has got too much.
Yeah. So I did enjoy it, but I don't know if I would stay up the next Sunday. But that's partly because I just cherish my sleep too much.
Yeah.
I do think there's a production problem with it though as well. Like if you're
Match of the Day.
Yeah, if you're coming on 8 hours after a match and you're leading with the highlights of that match, you're not thinking about it correctly. Like most people will have already seen the highlights and they want something else. If they were leading with something more interesting and changing the tone and the focus of the show, like that would be a good investment then of that 70 million if they were actually still had to pay that much for the highlights.
Hard though if like the lunchtime kickoff is a 4-3 thriller between the top two. I mean, you just have to start with that, don't you?
Yeah, but you can almost, like, not that you have to assume that everyone's seen anything, but you can almost make that assumption that people have seen it. Or
I often watch it without knowing even the results.
Yeah.
Let alone having seen anything.
You're doing well to do that now. That's impressive. Look, I think it's part of it just a wider the landscape is shifting so much. I know we have on the list of maybe talking about the LIV golf and the numbers and the TV numbers in golf. Like rugby numbers are struggling. Like the European Cup this year has been shown on Premier Sports because no one else wanted to pick it up. You know, the money that sustains sport comes from TV, but fewer and fewer people are watching TV. So there's a bit of an awful day coming down the line where TV companies don't pick up the bill, and then all these professional sports outfits have a wage bill to pay that's basically reliant on this TV income. So, like many industries, it's shifting so much, and we don't know what the future really looks like. And they do, like highlight shows in particular, like look so anachronistic and
maybe. Yeah.
But like I think there's 2 million is still a lot of people. I know and I'd say market share it's probably still high. Like I listen to the Rest is Entertainment podcast sometimes, and Richard Osman would always say linear TV still holds its own. It's just because it's falling, you focus on how much it's fallen by. But 2 million is still a big number of people watching.
And it's worth stating, we all nodded when you said I could be watching your current show that you're binging. It's interesting you didn't say I could be watching RTE2. You know, like I'd say its market share is phenomenal. Conor, do you have any quick solution for Sunday game before we move off this? Would you get ruthless and say, we're sorry everybody, your taxpayers' money's in our capable hands, we're showing 3 highlight packages tonight and we're going to do these games brilliantly, as opposed to trying to cram in 8 games?
I don't think you can do that, and that's why I always would have been a big supporter of the idea of having a second show, and even if it's the Monday show, like if the Sunday night thing has to be a rattle through everything that's there and maybe a coverage of the big controversies or stories or topics of the day, fine. Go a bit granular then on the Monday, because you can't ignore things. I mean, to the person in Carlow, their qualifier match or their Tailteann Cup match was every bit as important to the person from Galway who was in an All-Ireland semi-final, and you can't just disregard that just because the general viewership, because that's what the Sunday game is. I find myself, I have to say, watching more of the Sunday game as the season goes on, as the number of teams, the number of matches kind of whittles down, because it is still one of those television programs, one of the few television programs like the Late Show used to be on a Friday, that actually sets a bit of the tone for the Monday and Tuesday coverage. Like depending on how a particular incident is viewed and analysed by the people who are on the show, it does still carry a huge amount of clout.
As much as it used to?
Definitely less so, I would have.
Maybe less so, but maybe that's got to do with the tone of the punditry has kind of changed. There was a time when Monday morning was all about what Joe Brolly and Pas Blan were arguing about.
A long time ago now.
Yeah. No, you have Lee Keegan apologising for the man in the match.
But even now that might not feel like that long ago, but I think that shift has happened. I think that's part of the reason that the shift we're talking about has happened. Even the fact that, I had to go back to the point I made about Lineker saying more interesting things on his podcast than he said on TV. Like, why are people in TV studios for national broadcasters not comfortable giving their true opinions? Why are they being safe in that format? And then coming in here maybe on a Tuesday and being more candid because it's more relaxed setting. Yeah. How do you make the pundits more relaxed? How do you get more out of them? If they were saying interesting things, people would watch. Now, they might watch on clips, but those clips are valuable to the BBC and stuff. So there's definitely a future, but it's maybe not the format that we're watching at the moment.
That's true. Do you shoot your mouth off more in here or in the paper?
Definitely in here. No, but I think we all do.
Yeah,
I think we're way more careful about what we write and what we say, and like you have to be careful. Obviously, you can't just come in and start libeling people left, right, and centre. But I definitely think you're more comfortable throwing out kind of opinion and referencing things than you would necessarily in print.
The format's quite seductive that way. You kind of forget yourself a touch. Rugby, Rory, somewhat in the dock a touch. We talked about Michael Cheika's ban on Friday in a bit of detail. It was a good chat if you want to listen back to that. In effect, guilty of an intimidation of sorts of the independent doctor. The Leicester doctor had said that Ollie Chessum was fine to continue, but the independent doctor did not think so for over 5 minutes is the sense. Cheika was standing quite close to him, intense eye contact, and so he's been slapped with a ban. But I suppose the bigger picture, as the dust settles on it all, is it's emerging that there were mistakes made by 2 doctors in that match alone. So Ollie Chessum and Solomon Kata, they both played on for Leicester against Exeter, and they both should have been removed with a concussion. So what happened in the Chessum case is there was a HIA, and he obviously must have passed it, which again, this is the problem with the HIA, I suppose, but he must have passed it and went back onto the pitch. And so Cheika kind of thought, well, what gives? But the independent match doctor looked at the footage, and you remember Nick White for Australia stumbled. And so if there's a visible sign of concussion, then that supersedes passing the HIA. It's like, well, that's a telltale sign you're concussed. And so forget the HIA, it doesn't matter, off you come. So the independent match doctor had seen something in the footage that said, Chessum, off you come. And Cheika, eventually caught up on that. So that was one mistake where he goes back out with the HIA. But then Kata, who he clashed with, he was also allowed to play on. And the mistake there was that the doctor assumed he was being brought off the field, but he wasn't. And moments later, he gets a second blow to the head. And it's him tackling. He's sent off for it. He's been banned for 5 games. In the evidence, the point is kind of made, well, he's concussed. He didn't know what he was doing, which is such a bad look. You can't give him 5 weeks. He was out of his mind. And in the opening 2 rounds of the Premiership, there have been 3 errors. Tom Curry also played on concussed. Not ideal. I do sense rugby's really trying to move in the right direction, but that's a bad fortnight.
Yeah, and a lot of that sounds just like human error or kind of, 2 players go into a collision, you see one stumble, you focus on that player, but that doesn't mean that the other guy isn't right, but you only have one set of eyes, and the matchday doctor is looking at the player who he thinks is injured. And like there is a multiple doctor. Obviously, there's 2 team doctors. There are independent people. I was down in Musgrave Park in the rain on Saturday night, and there was the independent matchday doctor, or the kind of spotter, was on the pitch side with like a plastic bag over his head watching the footage. And I think that person was just a concussion spotter. So they've put all these resources in place to try and spot these head injuries, and yet these things are slipping through the cracks on a weekly basis. And all the talk about player welfare, all the best laid plans are there, and yet the sport is brutal, and players are going to get head injuries, and they're coming at such a frequency in these cases that they're not being able to deal with all of them. So do you put more doctors in place, or do you change the sport?
Yeah. Was I wrong to think these mouth guards, which measure the impact, might be a real panacea?
Well, the coaches hated them because there was false positives, and it was all to do with G-force, and players were taken off and were removed from games, and then they do all the tests afterwards, and the players were fine. But the G-force in itself should be an indication that maybe they should come off. So that was supposed to do it, and I think that's one of the tools they're using. And I do think they're largely getting the players off that they need to get off, but there are ones falling through the cracks. But everyone that falls through the cracks is a terrible look for a sport that's basically in retreat and trying to defend itself and trying to show that it does care about the players and all of the things that it says it does. So it's definitely a better place than it was when the players were taking the case against World Rugby and the different bodies were playing, and training is a much, I think, safer place. But you still have coaches who need to win and are putting, Michael Cheika is putting pressure on doctors. That looks terrible. I'm being an independent matchday doctor or a team doctor is one of the hardest games in sport. It's such a difficult position to be in because you've got the player who's your patient, but also probably is going against his or her better judgment. You've got a coach who needs to win. There's pressure coming from every angle, and it's not a good environment for making good decisions necessarily. So it's tricky. Ultimately, it's a PR ultimately the most important thing is that the players are being looked after, and I think they're trying to look after them as best they can, but it's not always, it's not a faultless or seamless exercise, but everything around it is just difficult.
Yeah. Leinster-Munster on the horizon.
Yeah.
On the pitch this week, Munster beat Ospreys 23-0. I know you were at that game. It was miserable weather. Leinster with Kieran Frawley starting at 10, played the first 40, and they were 28-0 up at half time. They beat Benetton 35-5 away from home. Very strong Leinster side, name for that game. Ulster were down in South Africa, beaten by the Bulls. No shame in that, 47-21. And then Connacht away in Wales, 24-23, a 1-point win against Scarlets. I saw a bit of the Munster game, bit of the Leinster game. Weather in Munster, miserable. But they rolled up their sleeves and had the embarrassment line ringing in their ears. And so we have Leinster-Munster now.
Yeah, they were very... I mean, I shout out to the people who did actually brave the conditions. I've never been in rain like it. I've never seen... Like, when you watch the news during kind of a storm or flood and you see people driving into floods and you're going...
Teresa Mannion saying...
Well, that was us up the... Yeah, that was us on the roundabout around the corner. Like, it was... everyone was wading across the road. The road outside Musgrave Park turned into a river. It was on a 4G pitch, so the pitch was grand, but the handling was unbelievably difficult. And Munster's handling held up really, really well. They were very impressive. I thought it was a perfect response. Jack Crowley was excellent. Their internationals were good. I think they'll perform on Saturday at Croke Park. I think there's a good buzz around playing there. Like, Leinster will get to play there again probably, but Munster may never get to play there again, these players. Like, Ireland will never play an international there, so unless there's another derby there or Munster move a European game, I'm amazed at the amount of tickets they've sold for it.
What are we at now?
70 plus.
Jeez.
More than, I think Dave Kelly did a piece this morning where it's more than the Dubs got all year. The popularity of these teams and the attraction of going to Croke Park for a rugby game is like, I was amazed by the Northampton sales. I'd never thought that was going to sell out, and it surpassed my expectations. And I'm continually amazed by the demand there is for these teams. It's really, really impressive, and I think they're going to get a game, because the team Leinster put out on Saturday was box office and didn't deliver across 80 minutes, but delivered in patches. And Munster know they need to be at a serious level to beat them. I don't know if they will beat them, but I think they'll get to a level where they'll put them under pressure. And it's exciting. It's a good week it's kind of the first real week of the season. So the first 3 weeks you're mixing matching teams. Dad's getting game time. There's mistakes. There's bad results like the Munster one. This is the pivot now towards November and the All Blacks. They named their squad this morning, and it's going to be like proper Ireland lads vying for Ireland places. So in front of a big crowd at a unique venue. So it's going to be an interesting week.
Tasty enough.
Yeah.
Sexton's autobiography will add a sprinkling of something onto that New Zealand game for sure. Paul Kimmage spoke to him yesterday, ran to 5-6 pages in the paper.
Yeah.
What jumped out to you? Anything, if people haven't read it, that you thought, God, that is interesting?
Well, I think it's worth reading. I think there's nothing I would put in the headline. Like, I think the excerpts had the bit of the stuff that will annoy people and piss people off. I thought it was really deep. I found the stuff about his faith very interesting. His the way he was taught to play rugby through the Spiritan priests kind of using religious iconography to teach him how to catch the ball.
Yes. Have your fingers like God in this image. And
keeping religious trinkets in his bag, saying prayers. He said his teammates would never realise, but he was saying the same 3 prayers he used to say in Mary. So I found stuff that, again, I know Johnny to a degree. I've covered him for his entire career, and I feel like I have a good sense of him, and that blew me away. I didn't know that he would go to mass on away trips. That he would, I found that really interesting. It was almost a throwback to a different era.
Yeah, he was saying night before games he'd skulk out of the Shelburne and go to Clarendon Street and get mass.
Yeah, like that's. And I'd say there's about 40 people in that church maybe, and that they know that Sexton was there, and that's never come out in the years since. Like, I just thought it was really, anything that gives you another layer is what you're looking for. So I know you've read the book. I have a feeling there might be a copy somewhere in the building for me that I need to go. I don't know where the post room is, so I need to go find the post room after this. But I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it.
I thought the bit about that, the most interesting or the interaction that jumped out to me most was that Sexton spoke about how much the approval of his father was a driving force in how good a rugby player he became. And he came back to Paul and said, but does everybody not see the approval of their father that much?
The book certainly positions him that way, and I thought in the interview he tried to reverse away from that a little bit.
Okay, because Donegal Boyle had a piece in the Sunday Indo yesterday as well about GAA players whose fathers had played inter-county, and it was an interesting kind of contrast, because in my experience with a lot of those guys, what they've seen is that their father has achieved a level of, whatever fame or approval and they want it for themselves. That's why they kind of follow in their footsteps more so than seeking the approval of their father. But it was interesting in the interview that Sexton seemed to think that this was a universal phenomenon, that everybody's primary motivation is to find the approval of their father through whatever it is, common interest that they share.
Now, I'm not sure any of us around the table know each other well enough to get into this, but do you would seeking the approval of one's father not be a fairly common thing?
Yeah, but I'm not like I suppose it was the way that he answered the question was that it was nearly framed as, well, isn't that what drives us all? Isn't that always our primary driver? And I hadn't really considered it until I saw it kind of put in those very straight terms.
I guess you certainly people could grow out of it as a kid for sure. Maybe in your teeth of your career, maybe not as much. I don't know. He's certainly very family driven and oriented.
Absolutely, and he is one of these players who I think found motivation in things people said about him, and the ultimate thing that someone said about him was his dad being in the bar in Bective saying, well, Johnny's grand, but wait till you see Mark, his brother. And that was the chip that drove him, and he would say Mark was a better player. Mark got really bad injuries and won an AIL with Mary's and is coaching Connacht now, but was a really top quality player. But I don't think Mark would claim to have been better than Johnny given what Johnny achieved, but that sibling rivalry, that approval of his dad, he found fuel from so many different places. It's interesting. My dad was my manager at underage level and dropped me loads of times, so I probably did seek his approval and didn't get it. But I think at this stage we've reached an equilibrium.
It's better than being the son of the dad who made sure to play him every game. And
I'd like to think that was what he was trying to compensate against.
Couple of other things to get to from the weekend. Alfred Dunhill Championship was on in Scotland. This is generally like one of the creme de la creme events for the European Tour. The DP World Tour, of course, now. It was won by a LIV player, Tyrrell Hatton. Likes it around St Andrews. But I suppose just on a slightly depressing front, if you're into your golf, and Conor, I know you are, the never-ending stalemate in golf looks to continue to be never-ending. It's now 16 months since the PGA Tour and LIV announced a new partnership, took everybody by surprise. Rory McIlroy, generally when he talks to the media, he gives about the most honest assessment of where things are. And I just had this moment of kind of heart sinking where he was saying, I think all the tours are going to keep trucking along and doing their own thing for the foreseeable future. It could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, just trying to figure it out. The hard thing is there are legal precedents that have been set in America and in Europe, and that makes it very different. No one likes lawyers. I certainly don't. And that's a big part of our issue at the moment. I think there is a willingness from all parties to try and get it to happen, but you have got tons of lawyers in the middle of it. And I suppose the thought of another 3 years, and look, maybe 4 or 5, everyone underestimates these things, of the current stasis is a really grim thought, Conor, if you do like your golf. Matt Fitzpatrick was asked about the situation. I think he summed up a lot of people's feelings in 4 words. He said, I just don't care, was what he said. And he was asked about the fact that Yasser Al-Rumayyan and Jay Monahan, Saudi and PGA Tour heads, played together. And he said, I don't think they're going to decide the future of golf in 5 hours at Carnoustie. Matt Fitzpatrick just finding the whole thing as tiresome as everybody else, really. So, we're at this point now where LIV is completely on the margins. I don't know anyone bar 2 or 3 people who watch LIV routinely. And yet the PGA Tour has really lost its status, its flat, that relevance of, well, the best of the best are playing together. Who comes out on top across a year was of interest. It was interesting in the build to majors. It was interesting at the year's end. Tiger Woods' 82 career wins is every bit as impressive in some respects as his 15 majors. Now all of that is just like diluted and washed away, and in the way that LIV feels exhibition-y and kind of homeless and just pottering around. The PGA Tour, now that it's lost kind of that kind of solid grounding of the best, now it is starting to me to feel a little bit random and arbitrary, and we're in Phoenix this week and we're going to Florida next week, but like what is this? This is every bit as exhibition-y as the thing over in LIV Saudi this week, and the viewing figures have gone off a cliff. Like golf is in a shocking place at the moment, and we've got years more of it. Yeah,
and like the only solution that anybody kind of close in positions of authority or power can come up with is to try and throw more money at the golfers, which clearly isn't working. And eventually they're not going to have any more money, because one side of the Great Divide is being fueled by an endless pot of cash, which is not designed to ever have to wash its face. And then what they're doing is hemorrhaging viewers, money, talent from the other tour. And I think maybe a thing that people don't speak about a whole lot, but is a very important factor here, is that players group on the PGA Tour side that Rory McIlroy was on and then resigned and then wanted to come back on and they wouldn't let him on. They're hugely influential. They're as influential as Jay Monahan. And you have somebody there in Patrick Cantlay who turned down 70 million to join LIV and now wants the PGA to pony up for it. So the money that he didn't deserve, he wants it from the PGA Tour, which clearly can't go around writing checks for 70 million and try and be a viable entity. And so far as anybody can make out, that players group is trying to, have a PGA Tour, one where they have to play fewer tournaments for more money, and all of them to be based in America. So there's a real problem with golf that it is becoming very localised. On one side, you have this FA kind of world tour LIV that nobody cares about because it's not a thing. And then you have this other thing, which is called the PGA, the Professional Golfers of America Tour, but has always had a more global aspect to it, but it's actually becoming even more localised. So, I mean, like Rory McIlroy had an idea and he spoke about it that, there should be a tournament in Australia that's nearly like the fifth major. And, the power brokers in American golf just, we don't want to go to Australia.
I'm not going to Australia.
Like it's miles away,
And viewing figures, so even some of the bigger tournaments like the Arnold Palmer and Phoenix, which is that's famous 16th and people around drinking beers, viewing figures were down 30% in the space of 12 months. Like, it is going off a cliff. Have you, as a guy who I suspect was watching on lots of Sunday nights over the last 10, 15 years, has it diluted for you?
Yeah, it has in a big way, because even then, the PGA Tour players, I know that they're kind of bound to entering a certain number of the what did they call them, the elevated events.
Yeah.
But like, there's only so many Sundays when you're watching like Ishkai Bhatia and Sahith Theegala, and you're just like where's everybody? You know, like I did a piece earlier after the Tour Championship final, the tournament that rounds off the FedEx, which was so like understated and underwhelming that
a couple of weeks ago we were talking and I said to you, when's the FedEx on? And I'm a golf fan, and you're like, sorry?
It was a month ago.
Yeah. and I was like, what? I couldn't have missed that. I never missed that. And then I remembered reading your piece the next day. It was Scotty Scheffler's 4-day and I went, oh Jesus, yeah, it was so bad.
It was so bad. And I remember just researching some figures, or finding a couple of pieces where people research figures and put them into my own piece.
It's good journalism.
But the only tournament this year where there was any sort of lift in viewership figures was
US Open Rory.
The US Open Rory. Why? Because Rory and his sort of psychodrama thing was going on, but it was also Rory versus Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah.
And what you need to have, like, golf hasn't got enough entertainment or charisma or watchability for it to be diluted into two tours.
Yeah.
And you need all of that on the pitch at the same time, with everybody watching every single week, for it to appeal to a bigger audience. And what's happening at the moment, I think, will do, it's hard to say that it's irreparable damage, but it will take a long time to unspool this.
Big time. And it's really unfortunate that this has happened really just right at the end of the Tiger Woods era. I mean, it may have kind of fallen off a cliff anyway, but you throw this in, it is a bad cocktail. So we're talking years, plural, according to Rory, before it's sorted out. The League of Ireland title race inevitably just threw up another situation which makes it more intriguing. Shamrock Rovers 2, Shelbourne 0. By all accounts, the Shelbourne performance did not reflect the result. Duff was saying that they'd played as well at Tala as they've played at any stage, really. The, I guess, ultimate point he's making as well is, if we win our last 3 games, we win the league. However, they have 1 win in 10. So it's
and the final one of those 3 games is away to Derry, who looked like I was at Derry Bows in the Cup semi-final on Friday night, and Derry just look like the grown-ups in the room. They have, like, Rovers have a huge amount of league winners from their 4-in-a-row team, obviously, but Derry do have a good contingent of the great Dundalk team in their ranks as well. So, my money would be on Derry at this point.
Okay,
Derry have a great capacity to slip up in games where they shouldn't slip up, but they've got 2 games this weekend during the international window. One is against Bows in the Brandywell. They win. They're both at home, I think, and they generally win at the Brandywell. But the drama of it has been brilliant. the fact that people are tuning in, I think people who wouldn't have ever tuned in before are tuning in is great, because it's exciting. Again, McBennett has been vindicated. He said a couple of years ago, you need a title race. Well, you've got Damon Duff, Stephen Bradley. Kenny's not in the title race, but he's around the place. And
Monday just gone was big.
Higgins, who is like, that's, you know, two members of Kenny's staff as well, you know, involved as well. It's compelling. And even Bradley had a go at Duff. Duff had a go at Bradley, then Bradley had a go at Duff, and Duff had a go back, and like that's, you know, we're talking about it here. Like you know, it's been really healthy, I think, for the league. And yesterday, like Tala is such a, you know, I'm no fan of Shamrock Rovers, but what they've got going at Tala, it looks great on television. A lot of places like Drogheda didn't. Drogheda, Wexford, which served up a bit of a cracker in the other cup semi-final, and Drogheda are in the final. But like Tala makes such a difference. If we could get the venues to look good on television, it would make a big difference.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting when you go up to Drogheda, because the atmosphere is always so good up there, and it's both sides packed, and obviously the ultra side is just it's literally jumping the whole time. But then when the TV camera shows the wall behind the goals, it looks completely different than it feels when you're there. But yeah, you said the great Dundalk team that used to be the Derry team before Dundalk started poaching the Derry players, brought them there and won a few league titles. But I'm waiting for this to actually go global. Like this title race could genuinely be picked up by world news at some stage, because of the way it is. Like you have 3 or 4 games there for most teams, 5 for Derry, and mathematically 70% of the league can still win it. Like right down to Waterford in 7th place, that's not going to happen. They need to win all their games and hope everybody else loses. Probably mathematically it can't work out, but it could if everybody did lose. And you know, like once somebody saw that, like 7 of the 10 teams in the league, like that is world news, really. A title race coming right down to that with so many teams that come.
Well, not if they saw Stephen Bradley's comments. He was asked 6 teams separated by 7 points. How do you account for that? And his quote was, "I think if we're being honest, the standard hasn't been great." This was invariably put to Damien Duff afterwards, and he said, "I know a lot has been said about the quality of the league, that it's disappointing and people have been poor. I totally disagree. There's no easy game. That's the way I see it. But here, if Stephen says everyone's poor," again, Stephen Bradley going, "Well, it's not quite what I'd say there are 250 professional footballers in this country who would find that a slight."
They would love it if they beat them.
You love it. And later on to RTE, "I think it's a poor comment because it's disrespecting the 250 professional players that have dedicated their lives to this season." Is Stephen Bradley correct? You'd be the most routine watcher of League of Ireland here as the standard.
I think the talent is spread far more evenly among the 10 teams than it ever has been before. There is no UCD who are getting beaten routinely week in, week out. It's always UCD that people use as an example, but it's been Finn Harps in recent years as well, have been a weak team who everyone could turn over. The beauty of this season, and from my perspective, it's been a horrific season. It's been one of Bo's worst seasons ever, and it's very unenjoyable to see the League of Ireland so vibrant and us not being a part at the table at all. But is that every Friday night you go to a game and you don't know what's going to happen? You could be playing the bottom team, but
is the quality suffering as a result?
See, I don't think the quality is as relevant as people give it credit for. It's vibrant, it's exciting, and it's competitive. And some of the games are high quality, but as we saw in Manchester United Aston Villa yesterday, it doesn't have to be League of Ireland for it to be poor quality. It can happen. Games. I think, yes, there's no great team. Rovers are probably a great team at the end. Yeah. And there's a couple of teams, I think Pats are looking like they could be a great team. I think next year, again, you don't want to wish your world away, the quality will improve. But I think the standard is almost a misnomer. If it's vibrant and competitive and exciting, that's going to get bums on seats, and that's what it is.
I remember listening to Jonathan Wilson actually at one of the Guardian football podcasts, and he spoke about, it must have been just last year, that he went to Sweden and spoke to some people about the Swedish league, and by all the metrics, you know, in terms of how they do in Europe and their UEFA coefficient, Swedish football, club football, is of an incredibly low standard and disimproving. But the attendances have gone the opposite direction. And the conclusion that they kind of drew in conversations with people was that, well, there was no outstanding team. There was no team that's going through a sustained period of dominance. So people are kind of tuning in because you don't know what's going to happen. And as Rudd says, like, it's about vibrancy and competitiveness. And like, people aren't sitting down saying, well, he didn't control the ball great there. Like, these are still professional footballers. They're playing at a high standard. You see great goals every week. And I think that's better for the league. I'm not necessarily sure that it's the standard that's going to, you know, bring the League of Ireland up to another level. I think
the standard of facilities will be far more important than the standard of football in some ways.
And more characters, I know you probably say this every day, but more characters like Duff and more Ryan with Stephen Bradley or anybody else.
Fewer Dublin clubs?
I think the population is there to sustain the Dublin clubs that are there, but I think the growth around the country will be, like, if you could get
community aspect. You know,
Like Sligo have had a really good season. Galway were almost in the title race until they weren't on Friday night. When Dundalk have been the dominant club for the last couple of years.
What's a Kildare man like me supposed to do?
Sustain Kildare County. How many Kildare County games did you go to?
Went to a few, you know.
First, you're not too far away from Pat's in Kildare, but you're right. We do need more clubs. But I think Kerry are a good example. Like Kerry have come in, they've kind of had 2 seasons of they nearly knocked Bows out of the cup. They've had 2. They didn't win any games last year. Maybe they won 1. Then this year they've won a couple. You have to build into it, but they're getting good crowds.
Yeah.
They've got a small but I think pretty nice ground that people do go to on a regular basis. It's hard to be a League of Ireland football club. It's really difficult to sustain it. So there's talk that Mayo will have a club in time. It does need a better geographical spread, but I don't think you take away the Dublin clubs because the Dublin clubs are all thriving. It's trying to. Like Finn Harp's trying to build a stadium, and it's hard. You need funding, and it's difficult to build anything in this country. So, but it's definitely there's so much room. Like I think it's not. We started off talking about the Ireland manager, like the Ireland team. Like the two things are linked, and the more investment there is at this level and below it, the better it will get at the top level, and the geographical spread is all part of that.
On the GAA front, to wrap up, then we have I see in the Dublin football final Coola. Last there in 1988 against Kilmacud Crokes. You call this the poshest Dublin football final of all time? Is that?
I would call it the poshest Gaelic football match of all time. Well, like what other county has posh people other than? No, I remember in 2011 when Dublin won the All Ireland and Kevin McManaman was first unveiled as a singer himself, and Philly McMahon had to write a song about the team for the homecoming, and to the strains of Damien Dempsey's "Sing All Our Cares Away," they made up a line about every line of the team, and they came up with a line saying that this was the poshest full back line in the world, and the three guys were Cian O'Sullivan, Rory O'Carroll of Kilmacud Crokes, and Mick Fitzsimons from Coola. So here they are now meeting in their first county final 13 years later.
So Coola's Dalkey,
yes, and
Kilmacud is kind of that Stillorgan, Dundrum neck of the woods. Who's posher? Coola.
Oh, Coola.
By a long way.
Yeah.
Are they the poshest club in Ireland?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Well, Kilmacud are the most hated.
Well, I don't know yet.
Silence so we can get this clip.
I'm just going to clip this without me pushing him. I'm joking. But Kilmacud are certainly regarded as super club, obviously. Shane Walsh, all that kind of business.
All that business, yeah. And
going for 4 Dublin senior titles in a row.
Yeah, and it's not easily done, and I think they've kind of Na Fianna were coming back hard at them after an awful start on Sunday, and looked like they might catch them at the very end, and Crokes held out, and they tend to do it the hard way for a team that have won so much.
It's funny, you're sitting opposite a man who's part of the coaching staff of Skerries. Yeah. That's not me, by the way, it's Conán. And you played Kilmacud in the first round, and you sort of think there's a team there to be, they're very beatable. Sorry, not very beatable. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to get both of you in trouble here.
Didn't say they were the most hated club, but didn't say they were very beatable. We lost by 2 and sort of came away thinking.
And would you be considered good?
We're decent. We got relegated though, but I think. Okay. But we were sort of expecting to push on this year, and as the championship proves, it was open for teams to push on. We'll be back, don't worry.
I've no doubt. But isn't the point with Kilmacud for their CV and their dominance, they don't necessarily win every game at a canter. There's often a kind of a roller coaster aspect of it.
It was the same with the Raheny game last year, and I do feel this year that they're sort of crying out to be beaten. I'd be surprised, just looking at how they've gone through the Dublin Championship, I would be surprised if they're not taken out in Leinster somewhere along the way. Okay. But I can feel the same about Glen up in Derry too. I just feel like both teams are teetering along on the brink. Maybe that's how you do it. Maybe that's how you get through.
They were dead and buried against Raheny last year. Dead and buried. Like it was a level game. It was Raheny were they a goal up, and then Sean McMahon went through on goal, and instead of throwing it over the bar, he ended up putting it wide, and they ended up getting extra time and went on and won the championship quite easily in the end. And I just wonder whether the semi-final was their potential Waterloo. But the thing is, they've lost so many tight games as well. Like the majority of that squad were there with Mullinachta in 2018, and they've kind of learned from the tight losses that they've had. So they don't blow teams away, but it's very rarely that you're going to dispossess them when they're 2 points up in the last throws of the game. Yeah. More, they'll suck you in, and all of a sudden you have Shane Walsh herring through or Paul Mannion on the ball. And the thing about it is, Walsh and Mannion will always draw a lot of the attention, but what you have with Kilmacud Crokes is about 10 or 12 players that are maybe just beneath inter-county standard, or possibly could be of inter-county standard.
Or Paddy O'Connor as well.
Yeah, Paddy O'Connor from Sligo. Guys who actually, if they were picked, would sit very easily at that level.
Yes, okay. And look, I'm obviously deliberately messing, but in terms of Cuala, isn't the reality, or isn't it generally said that the reason for the GAA explosion in Galway is that kind of great movement around a certain, I guess, a couple of generations ago now, that kind of country where GAA is so vital and vibrant, that infusion into the Dalkey area, and of course, well, our kids are going to play GAA, and I think there was a big Galway contingent actually that kind of ended up in Cuala. This is what Dave McWilliams told me one day.
Yeah, was it?
And that's kind of been...
Yeah, you tend to find with all the big Dublin clubs that's
the case. Yeah, it's not unique.
Like if you go back far enough.
True.
Well, what's interesting is that I think Cuala would have been regarded in a lot of ways as a hurling club, and obviously
2 All-Irelands.
Yeah, they won 2 All-Irelands, and there's one player, Conor, who's going to go on and play in a county final. But I think they have, they don't feel like the same kind of numbers game, because that group of players have been together quite a while now.
The hurlers.
No, the footballers.
Okay.
So they've been kind of knocking and coming up the way. They were senior 2 only a couple of years ago. But I think with somebody like Conor Callan there, anything really is possible. There was a lot of people talking about them before the start of the championship, and I didn't see what was any different about them this year to other years, but they were very, very, very composed the other night.
Okay.
It's becoming very all the middle class parts of Dublin now are really strong GAA. If you drive through Donnybrook on a Saturday morning, the rugby pitch in Donnybrook Stadium is covered in kids from Ranelagh Gales playing minis GAA. There's hurleys all over Donnybrook. My wife's from Dalkey. Like on Saturday morning, Sunday morning in Dalkey, it's just children with hurleys and children with the hurling team is largely made up of players from like 3 or 4 clubs, and most of them are Southside middle class clubs, aren't they, Conor?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes back to some of the schools around there, like Cloughstone would be a big like hurling in Dublin was once the preserve of a small number of clubs, most of whom were based on the north side of Dublin, but the demographics have completely shifted.
Yeah, I think it is that country infusion and the Irish schools, and they all have, like, I guarantee a big percentage of those kids have Irish names. Like, that's kind of thriving at the moment.
Yeah. There'll be an awful lot more Irish language speak. That's the other thing about the TG Carr can have their pick of interviewees after that Poshest Dublin football final of all time, because I'd say there could be 20 players who are fluent on between the two teams.
Conán has a bit of Irish, but you and Tessa are often talking in Irish in the office.
Oh yeah, it's very rusty though. I can understand everything that's said to me, and then talking back, I feel very dim when I'm talking back to people. Then I know my sentences are broken. And
it's actually, do you know what? I've never experienced before. It's actually a lovely thing. That just out of nowhere you two start talking Irish.
yeah. It's nice for me as well to try and brush up on it.
Yeah. But then here and there I heard Joseph, and I was like, are they talking about me?
How about you, Joe?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Before we sign off, you wanted to mention Bonner Maher?
Yeah, he retired this morning. Probably one of the more, I hate throwing out the cliche, an underrated player, but I suppose in Tipperary, where they tend to produce these incredibly skillful, almost frictionless forwards. He was a huge driver on that Tipperary team in 2010 that overcame Kilkenny. Liam Sheedy realised that to hurl against Kilkenny, first of all, you had to match them physically, and Bonner was such an enormous part of that. And actually, there were a couple of games around that time. The 2009 league final, when Tipperary really laid down the law physically to Kilkenny, even though Kilkenny won after extra time. And then the 2010 final. I think Bonner Maher was a key player in that Tipperary team, and I think those matches nearly set the tone for how hurling at that level was played for the next decade. It was hugely abrasive and confrontational, and as a half forward, I think he nearly became the prototype that after 2010, 2011, a lot of inter-county managers started looking around the county for people who were that aggressive, that strong, that front-footed, that abrasive, and they became very useful members of half-forward lines over the next few years. He was probably the first of his kind, if you want to put it like that. Okay, very good. Fellas, we are done. Conán, thank you. A special thanks to Rory O'Connor, Conor McKeon. That was not the Monday Pan. Done. Cheers, fellas. Very good. 57 minutes.
A little tighter than last week.
Nicely tighter. I'd say it was similar. What drove us over last week was our preamble at the start. I think.
Yeah.